Hey everyone, welcome to Living La Vita Loca podcast, a retro gaming podcast for some of your retro gaming needs. My name is Faz.
And I'm Rich.
And we are here to do our Freeplay Fortnightly episode, where we both take a game, review it, and then the other person scores it. We finished last week deciding that, what was the guy's name? Again, I've forgotten already. Austin Creed was the most successful Creed ever, and he was a WWE wrestler. And I can't help but notice you're doing your best Mick Foley impression again tonight, Rich.
What with my plaid shirt and general hairiness.
Yeah, please don't cut your hair or beard again. I like you like this.
Thanks!
I like it when you look like you could come and chop my wood.
Good God, that sounds like a really bad euphemism.
It was meant to. So, you would be the most successful Mick Foley of all. Like, as in...
I do genuinely wonder if I could make money as a Mick Foley impersonator. Then I realised that people would get me to do stupid shit.
Yeah, that's true,
Get throwing myself off of a flipping cage roof or something. And,
how much money would people pay you for that? I mean, I'd pay you money for that.
No.
Oh, okay then, that's fine. Fair enough. Freeplay Fortnightly. Let's get straight to it. What have you played this week?
I mean, I can do my review first if you like, because weirdly, your weird innuendo is potentially a bit of a segue.
Yes. Always
potentially.
Good. Oh, right, okay. Wait, is it into mine? It's not into mine.
I mean, all right, so yeah, more so into mine then. So, remember when we were, I think it was for the Do Something Unexpected week. And I had a kind of throwaway mention of having a look at like really queer visual novels as something unexpected. The other reason, besides the fact that a lot of them are very earnestly written and dealing with some very serious topics, and I don't want to just laugh at them for the sake of laughing at them, the other reason I didn't pick anything like that was the fact that I realised that actually visual novels, I kind of play quite a few of them anyway. Like they are not an unknown. And especially when you start factoring in like Phoenix Wright and stuff like that as well, and the Zero Escape stuff.
Let's not factor it in.
Well, I think you probably should.
Yeah, let's not.
So, anyway, long story short, I revisited one, and I am going to talk about Hatoful Boyfriend. Yeah, that's the reaction I wanted.
I don't know what that is.
Right, excellent. So, it is a visual novel / sort of light dating sim where you are a human girl dating birds. So,
what?
Right. So
you're going to write the title for this podcast because I don't know how to spell that. I don't know what's going on right now. Like, as in, I mean, the birds. Is that the segue? Is that the chopping the wood? The birds.
Yeah. So that kind of dialogue is rife in this game, right? So it's all kind of like a sort of lovingly written homage, a parody to like dating sim type stuff. So I checked with Fiona. She talks a little bit of Japanese. Yeah. Hato is pigeon. So technically, the title in English when you translate it is Pigeonful Boyfriend.
Oh, I was hoping it was Pigeon Fucker, but
no, that would be a little on the nose now, wouldn't it? Yeah, come on, this is a classy thing. Let's
What platform is this on? Sorry.
So this was on Vita.
All right, okay. Oh, right, wow. You played a Vita game for your free play.
Well, you can play it in many other places nowadays. It's been ported quite a lot.
Wow.
So
to whom?
To many people.
To birds?
Well, this is the thing, right? So that the story doesn't make too much of a big deal out of the fact that you are a human and you are just hanging out with birds. Like you go to St. Pigeonation School. It's your kind of...
I'm sorry, what now?
St. Pigeonation School.
Pigeonation?
Yep. Your best friend is... I think they refer to him as a rock dove. He is a pigeon. And all that kind of stuff. All of the main characters are different types of birds and all that kind of stuff going on. It leans into the dating sim thing by when you first meet a new character, you'll get like a little like sparkly pretty boy anime version of them alongside the bird.
Right, okay.
To be like, this is how you kind of see the human version of him. But it's like never referred to again. And all that, those kinds of details that are just like, you know what? Fair play. And the dialogue is just genuinely straight up some of the funniest stuff I have ever read. Like, seriously, there are some bits of it and certain characters that are just, I really like how they're written.
I don't know why it's making me... Do you know why it's making me cringe? Because
because of the premise?
No. It's not the premise. It's that just that. But like dating in real life is no better, or the dating scene is no better than what you're describing currently. Actually, I think it's probably just the same sort of thing. Like, I can imagine a world where people are dating birds now, and it's like, yeah, this is chill. This is okay. This is completely normal.
So this is the thing, though, right? Because it kind of draws you in with that whole like, oh my god, isn't this ridiculous kind of idea? And then you don't really date many of them. Like the stories, right? Genuinely, the stories take wild turns, right? And I'm dancing around some big spoilers, right? So it draws you in by just being utterly insane, right? And then you start playing it, and you start playing it ironically, right? I dare you to try and find someone that played it seriously. But you go through, and like, sure, there might be a couple of endings that are kind of like, that go down the more dating-ish route, but I would hesitate to say they are, ever anything like those birds are gentlemen, right? To a fault, some of them, but not all of them, right? And that's important, because you go through, and kind of like when I've talked about Virtue's Last Reward before, and you have the sort of different routes you can go down. You do get choices in this. You do get different endings, and you start to piece together like a broader narrative. Yeah. Like an overarching story. And then once you've completed various storylines, you can start to progress that. Okay. And it does come together in what is actually a disarmingly coherent, kind of really engaging. What am I talking about? It is a really engaging way, I think. And so I know a couple of other games I've said about recently, like Assassin's Creed the other week, like having big creative risks and not really sticking the landing. For me, this is one of those games that took some huge swings and I think stuck the landing. Yeah. It's fucking nuts, do not get me wrong, but I think it's really interesting how it pulls it all together. And it's not like a long playthrough really, but there's a lot to get out of it. Yeah. Visually, it's bright and colourful, and credit where credit's due. They managed to find some really sexy stock footage of birds. There are some lovely plinky plonky interludes on a piano, and like a really nice looking pigeon and a heart and all that. And it's what's happening? Some lovely birds in that game.
Alan Partridge.
No, but in all seriousness, birds. Right? Someone sat down and went to the effort of finding like
stock footage of birds.
Well, not even footage, actually. They're all stills now that I've said footage. Like stock photos of birds that somehow, once you see them and go with the dialogue, they fit.
You're like, oh, actually, that bird, like, it's beautiful plumage. Beautiful.
Well, partly that, but more importantly, like I was just saying when you were distracted by the notion of birds...
Sorry.
It works for the characters.
Okay.
Weirdly, it shouldn't, but it does. The only real snag I've got with it is the fact that it has about as much gameplay as a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
And that is not a joke. You are pressing X to progress dialogue, and then you are pressing up or down to select a choice, and that's it. There's none of the, like, Virtue's Last Reward, stuff like that, gives you puzzles to do. Or Ace Attorney, you'll be going and finding evidence.
Bring back Ace Attorney, all is forgiven.
Like that genuinely has a bit more meat on the bones when it comes to actual gameplay. This really doesn't. It leans so hard on the story. So I think arguably the biggest point against it is the fact that technically you could argue it's not even a game, really.
Yeah.
So if you're in the mood though, and I don't mean that like the way you're thinking. I'm not
thinking that anymore. I'm being a serious podcaster right now, and I'm trying to think of this game in the way that you'd like me to think of this game. And I've got a couple of points and questions about it.
Fair enough.
In a professional manner.
But like it's the sort of thing that if you are in the mood for a visual novel type thing and something that is like simultaneously quite funny, but also will go to some really like interesting places narratively, I think you could do a lot worse.
Okay. So The Nintendo eShop is always trying to hawk, haha.
Hey,
They're like bird pun. Always trying to hawk this kind of stuff at me, but like in the form of a more generic coffee talk sort of
Type thing.
vibe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I probably would be more interested in something where, you know, it's like trying to be a bit ridiculous. That is in because like you say, the concept of it, even though I know you've went down the path and said, well, actually, then the story kind of straightens out a bit. And it doesn't matter, you know, in a way that these are birds. They're just, you know, interactions.
It ties into the story.
Yeah.
Like, there is a point.
Okay.
I think that's ultimately what I was trying to get at. There is a point. And I think, like, there are other ones like Doki Doki Literature Club.
Yes.
Is another one that's quite often pointed at. And I genuinely wonder, would Doki Doki exist if you didn't have a Hatoful Boyfriend and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
And yeah, like a lot of the ones I was looking at on the eShop for that unexpected week, like I say, seemed to be written in a more earnest way. And you know, I tried a couple of demos genuinely because I thought if I can find something like Hatoful Boyfriend, that is going to be what I was going to do on unexpected week.
Yeah.
Largely because the twists in the story for Hatoful Boyfriend were so fucking unexpected.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find anything that was as immediately clearly trying to set me up for something like that. Which is not to say that you can see the twists coming in Hatoful Boyfriend, because I don't think you can. You could probably have an inkling, but you'll be a fair way in before it starts to come together.
I just think of a bird getting run over by a lorry or something. It's just like...
No.
Oh.
But you have stuff like, bird biker gangs and stuff like that. Like, it goes to some really fun places, but then it also goes to some really dark places as well. And I think that kind of, like, tonal mix, for it to all hang together the way it does, is actually a really impressive bit of writing, despite how it's dressed up.
A bird biker gang sounds like a dark place for me rather than a fun place. Yeah, I mean, I'm just, the only thing that I'm laughing about in my head so much is just the fact that, like, little things like, so the Adventures of Paddington at the moment, like, is in the cartoon show that's kind of sprung off the two hit films. Paddington has a friend, a pigeon, he calls Pidgington, and he wears a little top hat, and I'm like, he's my favourite character. My children will, like, definitely vouch and say that every time Pidgington's even mentioned, I'm like, it's just like, so I think I'd definitely be into the Hatoful Boyfriend, sorry, Pigeon, as a concept, just on the back of Pidgington, really. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've really enjoyed yourself. Like, is it? Yeah. How long is the playthrough?
It's longer than you think it will be.
Okay.
Like, it's not necessarily breezy, but I don't remember it being too onerous. Because, full disclosure, I played it in full quite a long time ago now, and then revisited it just to check that I wasn't, like, doing the old rose-tinted glasses thing, which incidentally was when I realised that I have literally sat through presentations at work that are more interactive than this. But yeah, I don't remember it being onerous. But it does start to kind of flirt with that line of possibly starting to outstay its welcome a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth sticking with, and I think a lot of people that are on board with what it's trying to do will.
Okay. So it's a difficult one for me to score because I'm sensing this thing where it's like, oh, it's really good, and if you're into this kind of thing, you'll be into it. But at the same time, there's obviously some detracting features, such as, it's a bit like a PowerPoint. But then I'm kind of thinking about games that we've played and games that we talk about, and then it's almost like, and then I'm like, can I score this as highly as this? Really? Like, am I about to do that? It's just like, but then every game, whether it's a game or not, should have its own fair process as well, shouldn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's almost like, what, you shouldn't be judging it against other games.
So this is, again, like, why I'm kind of pleased I can do it on this kind of a week, because I don't have to score it.
No.
Because I think there's an argument for it to have a reasonably respectable score. I think there's an argument for it to not have a score at all, because it's not a game.
Yeah.
I think there's an argument to be had that it could quite easily have been a choose your own adventure book and done the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. That is the level we're talking here. That said, like there are some bits and bobs that I think do put it more into the this is a game category than this should have been a book. Because when you do start to go through the storylines and like unlock like galleries and stuff like that, that's one thing. But when you start to get to the end of storylines, you also start to piece together the broader narrative from snippets of story, extra information, newspaper clippings, stuff like that, or that kind of thing rather, that all get collated in a central place, right? So it's like every playthrough and each different set of choices you make contributes to that overarching narrative.
Yeah.
Rather than a choose your own adventure book where you would go down a path and that's it. You get to an end and then ultimately you would choose a slightly different path, but you're not contributing to a bigger whole, if that makes sense.
Okay. So I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt to go with the reasonable score situation. I feel like every game should have its own space to breathe, and just because it's a certain thing doesn't mean that it should be scoring poorly. Like you've said, they've executed it really, really well. So why would they, So I want to say an 8 out of 10. I'm going to give it. Fair. I think that I'm just like, I feel like that's around there. Like if you feel like there could have been more of that choose your own adventure stuff, that would have piqued my interest even more. I'd been like, oh, a bit more of that for me would have even put it even higher. But I'm really glad that you enjoyed dating birds, stills of birds.
Seriously, like it's the kind of thing that if you are, if you have a particular kind of sense of humor anyway, I think you'll look at it and go like, shit, I've got to at least give it a go.
Yeah.
And that's the point where it starts to sink its claws in. Score-wise, I probably would have given it a 7, but I, in the same breath, would sit here and say 0 because it could have been a book.
Yeah.
But it isn't, and it does the bare minimum to be a game.
Yeah.
I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's. I think if you are scoring it as a game, and taking it as a kind of narrative experience, I think sort of 7, 8-ish is fair.
No,
but it is an acquired taste. I will grant you.
But that's the thing that is in that how do I sit here with these kind of things where I'm like, I always feel a bit like I really want to play these games, but actually I'd rather just listen to you play these games almost. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, as in, I feel like it's more for you, even though I'm like, oh, I really do want to put myself out there and try these and stuff. But actually, I'd rather spend 20 minutes listening to you enjoy it.
Try and explain it without spoiling it.
I'm a bit like, that's fine now. Like, I probably don't need to go and play it, even though you're probably like, oh, you should give it a go. I'm like, no, I'm all right. I think, like I got everything I needed from that.
I mean, if you like...
I filled my boots.
If you like, you could do yours, and then we could do a little spoiler warning, and I could tell you about the end of the story, and you can rescore it if you like.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, all right. No, that's fair enough. Thought I'd give you the option.
No, I don't want to spoil it either. I might just stumble into...
Because you might actually pick it up one day.
I probably will. So, speaking of scoring games then, last year, or around these weeks last year, you scored a game 6 out of 10. And it was a Vita game, and I believe you described it as a lot of the same gameplay, but not necessarily frustrating. Another sentence that came out of your mouth was that you could go away and do something else. So you give it 6 out of 10. Do you have any idea what? I'm not trying to be too on the nose with what the review was.
I was going to say not from that.
Do you know what I mean?
That's comically vague.
But I didn't. Well, exactly. Yeah.
That basically describes every Vita game ever.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I didn't want you to suddenly just be like, oh yeah, it's this. That is in. So now being pointed on the nose, then like you're on a skateboard,
right?
So the game was Olli Olli, and I have been playing, and I alluded to it on that podcast that I bought Olli Olli World.
Oh yeah.
I've been playing Olli Olli World for a year.
It's all led to this.
And I figured it's probably time to actually physically, get down to reviewing it for the podcast.
Yeah.
So this will probably be the one of the newest games that I own. I mean, I didn't realise it was out as late as February 2022. Do you know what I mean? It's very young as a game, as a concept. Olli Olli was 2014. So it's in its infancy. A hard sentence to say, as a franchise, and hopefully they'll continue. Developed by Roll7, who've done all the games. Funnily enough, little odd fact, it lost the Best British Game at the BAFTA Awards in 2023. They lost to themselves. Roll7 developed Rollerdrome.
Oh, yeah.
And that won Best British Game that year. So, within a 7-month period, they had 2 games that were nominated for the Best British Games, and they had one that won, one that lost.
Like the only British developer at the moment.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's like, so, it's good enough to be nominated for that kind of sort of lofty heights, if you will.
Yeah.
So in the Olli Olli podcast, you kind of mentioned that you might have played a little bit of it. Have you played all of it, or have you played some of it?
Olli World?
Yeah.
Oh, none of it.
Oh, right, okay,
no,
cool.
I didn't like the other 2 enough.
Yes, right, okay, fair enough, yeah. Because I remember you saying at the time, I said I'd bought it, and then we kind of touched on it a little bit, but never spoke about whether you'd played it or not.
No.
So that's cool, that's good then. So the reason I was talking about this game and it lasting for a year is because it's a world that is in let's go back to the start, because people might not, they won't listen to that podcast necessarily. That is in Olli Olli is a 2D skateboarding game where you've got to do lots of tricks and flicks with your control, sort of, I guess, your analog sticks, really. Is it mostly with those, I'd say, really?
Yeah, I think so, probably.
Yeah. And you've got to land your tricks as well. So you've got to press a button to land the tricks as well, haven't you? And it's a bit of a basic, I would say, pixel 2D side-scroller. Whereas Olli Olli World has become this pencil-drawn, pastel, fantasy world with 3D elements to it. And you still keep the core basis of what Olli Olli is all about, which is a side-scrolling skateboard game where you have to have really tight controls, and you do some really, I'd say, I guess, twiddling with your thumbs almost in a way. That is, it's really tactful playing of flicking your skateboard, much like the skate games were trying to point towards, and really precise landing of tricks. The one positive that I've gathered from what your review of Olli Olli was that it was quite difficult to do that by pressing the button at the right time to land the tricks. Whereas in Olli Olli World, you don't have to do that. They naturally land themselves.
Okay.
And I think that has really helped the game flow much better than what it did initially in Olli Olli and Olli Olli 2. But yeah, it really is a world that is, and you feel like you have a diorama in your hands. And now the reason I say I have it in my hands is because I've played this mostly on my handheld Switch. I'm willing to say that this is, when I say my handheld Switch, and I've questioned whether a Switch is handheld or not, I've used this specifically as a handheld game. It's been something that you can do while you're doing other things, such as listen to podcasts or, that is got the TV on in the background. It's very, and that makes it sound like, maybe it isn't the main focus of what you're doing, but it's so easy and free flowing, and you can feel what you're doing, that is in so well, and it's so precise at landing the tricks that a certain way that you're flicking your analog stick or pressing a button to do a grab, then actually it's going to do what you're telling to. So you can almost do it. You still look at the screen, but you kind of it becomes second nature after a while. It's got that arcade sort of vibe where you just do a run again and again and again until you get the point where you're like, I know what I need to press and where I need to press it. It's very fast and furious in terms of its actual gameplay, but there's a juxtaposition with actually how they've designed the game this time round. Whereas Olli Olli and Olli Olli 2 seem quite industrial in terms of backgrounds and things, and quite functional. This is much more of you're in this world and you're in this land called Radlandia, and
it seemed a bit more fantastical.
Yes,
right?
It very much is, and everything is almost. It sounds silly, but like the islands of this world are based on clouds. That is in
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah, exactly, and it's like, and everything, there's a rainbow from each of the lands to the next land.
Nice,
and you really do get the idea that it's almost like you're doing this really punishing, precise, sort of like I'd almost like call it a very functional task of this skateboarding and doing these tricks correctly, but they offset that really well with this floaty light sort of like, like, oh, isn't everything nice and lovely, and
kind of Adventure Time style animation.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. And they try to make it really irreverent. Almost at the start of each of the runs, you'll get your crew, if you will, your skating crew, are just talking absolute fucking jibber jabber at you, and at the end of it, talking jibber jabber. But it's really nice and positive. And almost like, yeah, you go, guy, and stuff, and just and even the characterization and the way they're presented, they don't talk, they get speech bubbles, and then they're doing that thing where you go, and you're like, oh, it's like you just feel like like it is a bit overbearing that you have an entire, and there's a lot to this game. There's a lot of levels to it, and there's a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of extra routes, and there's loads of collectibles and things that are worth collecting for you to be able to unlock things later on and stuff. There's a lot to it, so it can be a little bit overbearing when it's constantly that sort of chintzy sort of, they're just talking crap for talking crap's sake. But it does give you the option of skipping it, and it's quite funny when it does that, quite sarcastic in its own way, because it's like you can basically start the level, it'll be like, oh, you get two options. It'll be like, oh, you can listen to them and listen to what they've got to say, which actually adds nothing to your life, but if you want to live in that land, then you can do that. Or most of the time it gives you another option. It's just like, shut up, let's skate. And it's just like, and I was definitely a shut up, let's skate sort of guy. But sometimes I'd sort of like, divulge in what they had to say. But yeah, it really is, like I say, all encompassing. That is in, you do feel like they've thought of everything and learned everything they need to learn about how you actually do the mechanics of the skateboarding game, that side scrolling, the landing of tricks, the processing of tricks, using all the buttons that you can possibly use on the actual console or controller, whatever you're playing it on, and then decided that it actually will put every challenge you possibly can in there and put every sort of way of making you be able to use all those tricks and put it against this perfect background. That isn't it? You just feel like really chilled out and zen with, even though you're kind of like doing this hard thing, you feel like we've talked about when we talk about shmups and things, you kind of, when you start getting the flow across the screen and you start to feel at one with the game.
You get that kind of connection with it, don't you?
And that happens after a while with Olli Olli World as well. It's you can engage with it as much as you want, really. So it is, towards the end of the game, it does get to the point where, like, man, it is like you have to be so fucking precise to be good at this game. And I remember when you talked about Olli Olli and sort of said, I guess that I feel like they've really kind of designed this to be able to be accessible for newcomers, but still maintains a lot of challenge in it. Like, so I played the game all the way through, but at that point you knew fine well that that's like 17% completed or something. There's so many things you can go back to do and do different routes, and I will, because it's such an easy thing to just pick up and sit in front of a TV screen or something like that, or like, ignore my children. Like, it's just sort of like, they'll watch it over your shoulder and be like, what are you doing? And they you can see that they're interested as well. But yeah, it's such a sort of a thing that you can dream about completing to 100%, but I think it'd take a heck of a lot of doing, especially later on in the game as well. There is some really hard routes to go down and some really hard tricks to land in terms of challenges, but you can get through the game and complete it being a newcomer like I was to it as well. And they do a really good job of layering in the way they add tricks to it. So like, they'll add every new land, if you will, they'll probably add a new sort of thing to your repertoire. It'll be like, oh, you do a grab, or you do like, a tweaked grab the next land, or you can land on staircases. And then you kind of realise, oh, I can now go back to, land 1 from land 5, and I can now do this route, which I couldn't do before. Cause
wait, it's a Metroidvania?
Yeah, pretty much, honestly, it pretty much is. Like, in a way.
Huh.
There's a lot to be able to do, kind of. It does feel like that, actually. It does feel like even the characterization of it. Yeah, it is weird. So, no, I'm not seeing it described like that anywhere, but certainly now that you've said that, I'm like, there is a bit of that to it. So, and so at the time of the podcast of Olli Olli, and I said I'd bought Olli Olli World, I said that it cost £25 for the RAD edition. You can now get, if you wait in just whatever console you're on, every 3 months, it'll come around on the sale. So it's just been on sale on Switch. I think it's just come off with the Indie World sale. It's currently on sale, I think, on PlayStation for £12, the whole Rad Edition. So that's the expanded pass, basically. So there's 2 parts, and I'm gonna break it into first here, Rich. I cannot find a review for the whole of the Rad Edition of Olli Olli World. This is a world exclusive of the Rad Edition of Olli Olli World. So
I have no party poppers. Sorry. Insert fun here.
Oh, you have no idea. The game that I've just done for the next free play has got that kind of that you've just said.
Oh, good.
A thing that I'm like, oh, that's so exciting. I'm like, maybe we should just do it now. So yeah, the Rad Edition has got 2 parts of an expansion pass. Got Sean Connery. There's the Void Riders, and then there is the Flow Zone, and the Void Riders they basically come with 2 gimmicks really that are different from the main game, but they are very accessible and easy to do. So the Void Riders one it's all to do with sort of sci-fi aliens, and the aliens come down and they're even weirder than the main characters, and they're like, you must love our lord and you have to come and skate for him in our void, and you're like, okay, and then that's when you can be like, do you want to skate, mate? But the levels, do I call them harder? They are more complex. There's more bits to them. I don't think they're necessarily harder. You just have to think about doing more things.
Okay. Yeah.
But what the gimmick in those ones is, every so often a UFO will show up and it'll have its tractor beam underneath it. And as soon as you get into that beam, you have to rise up the beam, so basically to carry on the level. So it almost like if you're like thinking of a canal lock, if you will, to go up that canal lock sequence, you have to do a tweaked grab, just a normal grab into that. So you jump into the tractor beam, you've got to be doing a grab to be able to actually get sucked up.
Higher up.
Higher up to be able to carry on the level. So it just gives you something else to think about, and that's a really cool thing. But yeah, hella hard at the end. I've got 1 level left doing that, and that's the boss, the last level of Void Riders, and that's taken some beating. That is like, I've got to really focus on that, and I've not quite sat down and thought, right, I need to spend an hour doing this, really.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things where in Olli Olli World, and I can't remember if you said this about Olli Olli or not, but there are checkpoints that if you pass a certain checkpoint when you're doing a level, then actually you start again from that checkpoint.
Oh, right. No, I don't think they had that in the original one, because the levels were quite short.
Yeah. So, which is useful in the main game, but then you get to like the sort of the end of the expansion pass of the boss level, and it's like, there are no checkpoints. Ooh. So you've just got to land everything perfectly. So that's where you've got to learn it like a shmup, where you've got to learn, I do this trick, I do this trick, I do this trick. This has got this much height coming off this ramp, this grind, etc. You've got to grind to a manual and then into a jump into a UFO, and it's almost like
you actually have to route it.
Yeah. So, which is, I imagine that would speak to you quite a lot.
Yeah, probably would actually.
So, and the Flow Zone one, I wouldn't say it's as strong as I guess, not necessarily the story is strong on the Void Riders, but you go into the clouds, further into the clouds with a gang of people. I'd want to call them like cloud pirates almost in a way. And the idea of this one is, and I'd say that the mechanism isn't as strong either, is basically just get a massive boost. So it's like you go through a hurricane, and it just gives you a speed. That is, so you're just doing levels much quicker. So you'll hit them. Now there is a cool thing about it that it doesn't always go the same direction. So you can hit these sort of like wind airflows. You'll hit one, it'll send you back the other direction.
Oh right. Okay.
So on a different route. So that's kind of cool. I made it sound like it wasn't as good as the other one, like in terms of, I'd say it's just a little bit lesser, but it's still very good. And it's still definitely worth having the expansion pass, because you get to that point where, like, if you've done the whole game, if you want to be a completionist and go back and do the 100% thing, you can do. But I'm always like, I want more new. Mm-hmm. So having those extra bits has been quite good. So I'm about halfway through the Flow Zone. The only thing about that is that you have to pick up collectibles in this to be able to progress. So there are little bits where it's like you've got to find a golden ticket, I think it is, of something, and you have to have like 12 golden tickets before you can pass to the next bit of the land.
Got you.
But that's the only thing that's different about it. In general though, like as in, like I said, I spent a whole year just playing this on my lap while I've been doing other things. and that's been really good to be able to do. You know, even coming away from games that we've been reviewing on a weekly basis and things, just kind of like I will find myself sometimes like, I'm just going to play half an hour Olli Olli World and I'll just do the next level. And it feels like the perfect game for that. So yeah, that's me, you know.
Nice.
Yeah, no pigeon fucking.
Well, no one said anything about pigeon fucking. I think you'll find.
That's disappointing to me.
Well, you know, I think you want a different, audio-visual experience for that.
I don't know if I do.
So, did you, besides the sort of how tricky some of the later levels got, I guess it's to be expected. But like, were there much in the way of any other kind of like downsides or anything like that? Because I get the impression that there aren't really much of anything. Because if it was, say, if you've got like, I don't know, a slightly iffy frame rate or the inputs felt a bit stodgy or whatever, like it wouldn't work as an experience, right?
It doesn't suffer for any of that.
I was going to say,
however they've developed,
it's silky smooth.
Yeah, however they've developed this game, and whether that means that the cell shaded pastel colours, whether that means that works for it, I don't know. But there's no slowdown at any point. Like, as in, because it is that one of the most precise games I have ever played. That is in a positive manner. That is in it never seems to let you down. Whenever you fail, it's you. Do you know what I mean? It's just you not inputting what you need to be input. So
what is your least favourite aspect of the entire thing then?
I think that just I think it probably sounds a bit bad, but sometimes it is just the irreverence almost in a way. Is in that it's just like you kind of don't need them like sort of filling out a lot of the bits and stuff. So, but yeah, there's very little that lets it down. You know, like as in whatever, and this is hard for me to sort of. This is one of those things you can't quite put your finger on it. I can't just go, it's flat out the best game I've ever played. That is in like Hotline Miami was or whatever. Just don't really, but it's as tight as Hotline Miami in terms of its that isn't just its core concept. But there's just something in there where I'm like, whilst I was being really positive about the idea that you can do other things while you're doing this. The flip side is that you can do other things while you're doing this almost. That is in, you know what I mean? Like I'm not like, I wasn't fully super uber focused where I wasn't like, I need to get through this game in a month. It had loads of time to breathe, which is great, but also at the same time, it was like I didn't find myself desperate to come back to it all the time. Yeah,
and it also seems like when it decides that it's going to get difficult, it is going to need attention and time and dedication to make some decent headway.
Yeah. I just want to say that it was just great value for money. And if you can pick it up for £12, which means to be, at most times on most consoles, just give it a few months, keep looking in the store. I really would recommend picking it up if you like skateboarding, if you like games where you feel like it's very tactile and stuff. Yeah, brilliant.
I have put it on the spreadsheet as a 9 out of
10. I think that's I would have gladly have taken that when I came in here. I don't know what it is though. There is something there that just drops it a mark from the top game, and maybe I'll have to think about it and come back. And it's a great question to ask me because I was thinking about it on the way over. I was thinking, what is it that's kind of just hanging it back in my head that I'm thinking, there's something there that, and maybe it's just a preference, maybe it's just a personal preference. But
but that was why I wanted to ask about what your least favourite bit about it was, because while you were talking, like it sounds as though it's very interesting, artistically. It's clearly got really sound mechanics, clearly good enough to keep you coming back a year later and playing it. And yet it didn't sound like there was that kind of like killer moment that just put it over the edge. Yeah. It just felt like it was there was a little something that was just falling short.
If someone still, so remember when we did our podcast recently where I picked in our 100 draft, I picked Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 from that list first. For all its foibles and failings and stuff, if you came to me and said, what are you going to pick, Olli Olli World or Tony Hawk 2?
Yeah.
I'd probably pick Tony Hawk 2. Like, isn't it? And it's almost just like, there's something about those games that are just spaffing around with the buttons.
No,
like,
can I put a theory to you then?
Please do.
If we're talking about why you would pick Tony Hawk 2 over Olli Olli World and you can't work out what Olli Olli World is, where it's falling short, what about the soundtrack? Like, what is that soundtrack like?
So that is a good point, because I felt like there was times where I wasn't hip enough to be playing this game. Almost like I felt like I should be wearing rainbow braces and my Nirvana t-shirt and stuff. And it is. Do you know what it is? It's really light electronic floaty stuff that sits with the game so well. But like you say, I don't remember any of it.
But Tony Hawk's 2 is basically seminal as far as we're concerned.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about it a lot before, but that is a ludicrously high bar for us personally, right? And so I can imagine that, if you're talking about the difference maker, I could put good money on soundtrack, possibly having a bigger bearing on it than you perhaps thought.
A really good shout. I feel like you've reached into my brain and pulled out what I needed to be pulled out there. So good therapy.
Thank you.
From mankind over there.
Have a nice day.
But thank you for helping me with that, because I think that probably there's always something, isn't there, where it's floating around. And
yeah.
So that's really cool. Thanks for your time this week, guys, and we will see you again soon.
Cheers.
Or speak soon. Hear from us soon. Bye-bye. So who'd have thought that I'd be speaking to you a lot quicker and earlier than like we said at the end of the pod. Only a couple of days after deciding to release our Olli Olli World review, the Rad Edition, the world exclusive, just to find out that, Take-Two, the parent company that now own them, have owned them since 2022, have decided to shut their development arm down. So Roll 7 reportedly, widely reported, to have lots of job losses, people being let go, which is a real shame. Hopefully those people, I'm sure they will find work somewhere else and continue to do great things like Olli Olli World and Rollerdrome. So just thought it'd be, we didn't want to release Olli Olli World as a review and be a bit glib, and then you guys are reading the news that they've been shut down. So do you know what? It really deserves that 9 out of 10 that Richards give it, and we're very thankful that through the life of the Vita and moving on to the Switch, we had some great games from that business. So thanks for the good times, Roll 7. Speak to you soon again.